Dear students, in this video, we are going to discuss the chapter Democratic Resurgence from your textbook in Political Science, class 12th, Politics in India since Independence. The old name of this chapter was The Crisis of Democratic Order. We saw in the previous chapter that the Congress party recovered after 1971, but it was not the same kind of party. The events that took place between 1973 and 1975 brought new challenges to India's democratic politics and the institutional balance sought by the constitution. Because of these developments, the emergency had to be imposed in June 1975. Normally, emergency is associated with war and aggression or with natural disaster. But this emergency was imposed due to perceived threat of internal disturbance. The end of emergency was dramatical. It ended as dramatically as it had begun, causing the defeat of Congress party in the Lok Sabha elections of 1977. So, in this chapter, we are going to see the crucial phase in the history of democracy in India. And also, we shall ask questions, questions that have remained controversial after all these years. Why was emergency imposed? Was it necessary? What did the imposition of emergency mean in practice? What were the consequences of emergency on party politics? What were the lessons of emergency for Indian democracy? And now let us begin with the first topic of the chapter, background to emergency. In the previous chapter, we saw that Indira Gandhi had emerged as a towering leader with huge popularity. During this period, the party competition became polarized or divided. This was also the period of tension between the government and the judiciary. The Supreme Court found many actions of the government to be violative of the constitution. Congress party said that this action of the court was against the principles of democracy and parliamentary supremacy. Congress party also said that the court was a conservative institution and was creating hurdles in the way of implementing pro-poor welfare programs. The opposition parties felt that politics was turning to be personalized and that the government authority was turning into personal authority. The split in the Congress had sharpened the divisions between Indira Gandhi and her opponents. The next topic starts economic context. Though the Congress party gave the slogan of Garibi Hatao in the elections of 1971, the social and economic condition in the country could not improve much after 1971 and 1972. The crisis of Bangladesh had put heavy burden on India's economy. About 8 million people crossed over the East Pakistan border into India. This event was followed by war with Pakistan. And then the US government stopped all aid to India. Oil prices increased manifold, especially during this period in the international market. And this led to an all-round increase in the prices of commodities. Prices increased by 23% in 1973 and 30% in 1974. This huge inflation caused much difficulties to the people. Industrial growth was low and unemployment was very high, especially in rural areas. In order to reduce expenditure, the government froze the salaries of its employees. And because of this action of the government employees became more dissatisfied. There was a sharp decline in agricultural productivity because of the failed monsoons in 1972 to 1973. Food grain output declined by 8%. General atmosphere of dissatisfaction because of the prevailing economic situation could be seen all over the country. And because of all these reasons, the non-Congress opposition parties had the opportunity to organize popular protests. Students' unrest became more pronounced or noticeable in this period. Also, the activities of a Marxist group increased. Marxist groups did not believe in the parliamentary politics. These groups took the arms and rebellion techniques for the overthrow of the capitalist order and the established political system. The next topic starts Gujarat and Bihar movements. In January 1974, students in Gujarat started an agitation against rising prices of food grains, cooking oil, and other essential commodities, and also against corruption in high places. Main opposition parties joined this protest. This protest led to the president's rule in the state. The opposition party started demanding for the fresh election to the state legislature. Morarji Desai. Morarji Desai was a very famous leader of Congress who was the main rival of Indira Gandhi when he was in the Congress party. He made an announcement that he would go to an indefinite fast if fresh elections were not held in the state. Because of the intense pressure from the students, which was supported by the opposition political parties, assembly election were held in Gujarat in June 1975. Congress party was defeated in this election. In Bihar also, the students came together in March 1974 to protest against rising prices, food scarcity, unemployment, and corruption. The students invited Jayaprakash Narayan, who had left active politics and was involved in social work. They wanted him to lead the student movement. Jayaprakash Narayan accepted the offer and he made one condition. Condition was what? That the movement will remain non-violent and will not limit itself to Bihar. So the students' movement took a political character and had a national appeal. Big number of people joined this movement. Jayaprakash Narayan demanded the dismissal of the Congress government in Bihar and gave a call for total revolution in the social, economic and political spheres in order to establish what he thought to be true democracy. A series of strikes, bandhs, gheraos, All these things were organized in protest against the Bihar government. Though the government had intense pressure on it, it refused to resign in Bihar. Jayaprakash Narayan had a desire to spread the Bihar movement to the other parts of the country also. As this Bihar movement was gathering the momentum, the railway employees gave a call for nationwide strike, and this threatened to paralyze the country. In 1975, Jayaprakash Narayan led a people's march to the parliament. This was one of the largest political rallies ever held in capital. Jayaprakash Narayan got also the support of the non-Congress opposition parties like the Bharatiya Jana Sangh, the Congress O, the Bharatiya Lok Dal and the Socialist Party and others. These parties wanted to promote Jayaprakash Narayan as an alternative to Indira Gandhi. The Gujarat and the Bihar agitations were seen as anti-Congress rather than opposing the state governments. They were seen as protests against the leadership of the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi believed that the movement was motivated by a personal opposition to her. The next topic comes conflict with judiciary. Conflict with judiciary. This period also witnessed the differences between the ruling party and the judiciary. Two developments added to the tension between the judiciary and the executive. Just after the decision of the Supreme Court in 1973 in the Kesavananda Bharati case, a vacancy rose for the post of Chief Justice of India. It had been a practice to appoint the senior-most judge of the Supreme Court as the Chief Justice. But breaking the old practice, in 1973, the government set aside the seniority of three judges and appointed Justice A. N. Ray as the Chief Justice of India. The appointment of Justice A. N. Ray became politically controversial because all three judges who were replaced or superseded had given rulings against the stand of the government. People who were close to Indira Gandhi, they were saying that there was a need for a judiciary and bureaucracy committed to the vision of the executive and the legislature. And finally, the consequences of the confrontation were against the Prime Minister. The ruling of the High Court declared Indira Gandhi's election to the Lok Sabha invalid. The next topic is declaration of emergency. On June 12, 1975, Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha of Allahabad High Court passed a judgment declaring Indira Gandhi election to the Lok Sabha invalid. This order came on an election petition filed by Raj Narayan. Raj Narayan was a socialist leader and a candidate who had contested against Indira Gandhi in 1971. This petition challenged the election of Indira Gandhi on the ground that she had used the services of government servants in her election campaign. The meaning of the judgment of the High Court was that legally Indira Gandhi was no more an MP and therefore she could not remain the Prime Minister unless she was once again elected as an MP within 6 months. Please note this. An interesting turn comes in this case when on June 24, the Supreme Court granted her partial stay on the High Court's order till her appeal was decided. She could remain an MP but could not take part in the proceedings of the Lok Sabha. This is an important point, very important point. The next topic is crisis and response. Now the stage was ready for a very big political confrontation. The opposition parties led by Jayaprakash Narayan were pressing for Indira Gandhi's resignation continuously. They organized a massive demonstration in Delhi in Ram Leela ground on 25th June 1975. Jayaprakash Narayan announced a nationwide satyagraha for her resignation and asked the army and the police and the government employees not to obey illegal and immoral orders. This action of Jayaprakash Narayan and the opposition parties threatened to bring the activities of the government to a standstill. Congress party felt that the mood of the country had turned against it more than ever before. On 25th June 1975, the government declared that there was a threat of internal disturbances and therefore it cited Article 352 of the Constitution. Very important point. Under the provision of this article, the government declared a state of emergency on the grounds of external threat or a threat of internal disturbances. The government gave the grounds for declaring the emergency that a grave crisis had arisen, which made the proclamation of a state of emergency necessary. Technically speaking, this was within the powers of the government because our constitution provides for some special powers to the government once an emergency is declared. And now these are the very important points to remember. Please listen to this very attentively. Once an emergency is proclaimed, the federal distribution of powers remains practically suspended and all the powers are concentrated in the hands of the union government. Also, the government gets the power to curtail or restrict all or any of the fundamental rights during the emergency. As per the wordings of the constitution, it becomes very clear that an emergency is seen as an extraordinary condition in which normal democratic politics cannot function. Therefore, special powers are granted to the government. On the night of 25th June 1975, the Prime Minister recommended the imposition of emergency to President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed. He issued a proclamation immediately. After midnight, the electricity to all the major newspaper offices was disconnected. In the early morning, a large number of leaders and workers of the opposition parties were arrested. Even the cabinet was informed about this emergency at a special meeting at 6 a.m. on 26th June after all this had taken place. This next topic starts consequences. This brought all the agitations to an abrupt end or abrupt stop. Strikes were banned. Many opposition leaders were put in jail. The political situation became very quiet but tense. In order to use its special powers under emergency provisions, the government decided to suspend the freedom of press. The newspapers had to get prior approval for all the materials to be published, and this is known as press censorship. Apprehending social and communal disharmony, the government banned RSS and Jamaat-e-Islami. Protests and strikes and public agitations were banned. And the most important point is that under the provisions of emergency, the various fundamental rights of the citizens stood suspended, including the right of citizens to move to the court for restoring their fundamental rights. The government used Preventive Detention Act to arrest large number of people during the emergency. Under the provision of preventive detention, people arrested and detained not because they have committed any offense, but on the apprehension that they may commit an offense in future. The arrested political workers could not make use of habeas corpus petition to challenge their arrest. On behalf of the arrested persons, many cases were filed in the High Court and Supreme Court, but the government claimed that it was not even necessary to inform the arrested persons of the reasons of the grounds of their arrest. Several high courts gave judgment that even after declaration of emergency, the courts would entertain a writ of habeas corpus filed by a person challenging his or her detention. In April 1976, the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court overruled the High Court's decision and accepted the government's plea. The meaning of this decision was that during the emergency, the government can take away the citizen's right of life and liberty. This judgment closed the door of judiciary for the citizens and is regarded as one of the most controversial judgment of the Supreme Court. The Parliament also brought many new changes to the Constitution. In the background of the ruling of the Allahabad High Court in Indira Gandhi's case, an amendment was made declaring that elections of Prime Minister, President, and the Vice President could not be challenged in the court. Next point, next heading: controversies regarding emergency. Emergency is one of the most controversial episodes in Indian politics. There are different viewpoints about the need to declare the emergency. Another reason for the controversy regarding the emergency was using the powers given by the Constitution. The government practically suspended the democratic functioning. According to the investigations by Shah Commission regarding the emergency, there were many excesses committed during the emergency. The next topic: was the emergency necessary? The Indian Constitution described internal disturbances as the reason to declare the emergency. Before 1975, emergency was never proclaimed on this ground. After emergency was imposed, many questions and debates arose on the issue whether the emergency was necessary or not. Communist Party of India, CPI, believed that there was an internal conspiracy against the unity of India. It believed that in such circumstances, some restrictions on agitations was justified. But after the emergency, the CPI felt that its assessment was mistaken or wrong, and that it was an error to have supported the emergency. The next topic is what happened during emergency. The government said that it wanted to use emergency to bring law and order, restore efficiency, and above all, to implement the proper welfare programs. The government announced 20-point program during that period. The 20-point program included land reforms, land redistribution, review of agricultural wages, workers' participation in management, eradication of bonded labor, etc. As a result, the poor and rural people also expected effective implementation of the welfare programs that the government was promising. So the different sections of the society had different expectations from the emergency, and also they had different viewpoints about it. The critics of emergency pointed out that most of these promises remained unfulfilled, and these were simply meant to divert the attention of the people from the excesses that were taking place. And the government argued that opposition party must allow elected ruling party to govern according to its policies. Apart from the arrests of political workers and the restrictions on the press, the emergency directly affected lives of common people in many cases. Torture and custodial deaths occurred during the period of emergency. Arbitrary relocation of poor people also took place. Please note, over enthusiasm about population control led to cases of compulsory sterilization. These instances show what happens when the normal democratic process is suspended. Now, the next topic is lessons of emergency. The first lesson of emergency is that it is extremely difficult to do away with democracy in India, as we have seen that normal democratic functioning resumed within a short span of time. Secondly, it brought out some inexactness regarding the emergency provisions in the constitution that have been rectified since. Now, internal emergency can be proclaimed only on the grounds of armed rebellion, and it is necessary that the advice of the president to proclaim emergency must be given in writing by the Council of Ministers. Very important point. And thirdly, the emergency made everyone more aware about the value of civil liberties. The courts also have taken an active role after the emergency in protecting the civil liberties of the individuals. Many civil liberties organizations came up after this experience of emergency. The next topic is Politics after emergency. The most valuable lesson of the emergency was learned as soon as the emergency was over. The Lok Sabha elections were announced. The opposition fought the election on the slogan, Save Democracy. The people's verdict was against what? Against emergency. The lesson is very clear. Please note it down, very important point. Governments that are perceived to be anti-democratic are severely punished by the voters. Next topic. Lok Sabha elections 1977. After 18 months of emergency, the government decided to hold elections in January 1977. All the leaders and activists were released from jails. All the opposition parties came together and formed a new party known as the Janta Party. Jayaprakash Narayan became the leader of the new party. The final results of the elections took everyone by surprise. The Janta Party and its allies won 330 out of 542 seats in the Lok Sabha. Janta Party itself won 295 seats and enjoyed a clear majority. In these elections, the Congress party was defeated for the first time since independence, as it could win only 154 seats. Now the next topic starts, Janta government. Janta party lacked unity. After the election, there was stiff competition among three leaders for the post of Prime Minister. Number one, Morarji Desai. Number two, Charan Singh. And number three, Jagjeevan Ram. Eventually, Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister, but that did not bring the power struggle within the party to an end. The critics of Janta Party felt that Janta Party lacked direction, leadership, and a common program. The Janta Party split and the government, which was led by Morarji Desai, lost its majority in less than 18 months. 18 months. Another government led by Charan Singh was formed with the support of the Congress party. But the Congress party later decided to withdraw its support. As a result, Charan Singh government could remain in power for just 4 months. After all these events, fresh Lok Sabha elections were held in January 1980, in which Janta Party suffered defeat. Congress Party, led by Indira Gandhi, nearly repeated its victory in 1971. It won 353 seats and came back to power. The experience of 1977-79 taught another very important lesson in democratic politics. Governments that are seen to be unstable and quarrelsome are severely punished by the voters. Now the next topic and the last topic, legacy. Since 1969, the Congress party started losing its character as an umbrella party. The Congress party now claimed itself to be the only socialist and pro-poor party. The opposition parties relied more and more on what is known in Indian politics as non-congressism. Indirectly, the issue of welfare of the backward castes also began to dominate politics since 1977. So here we wind up the chapter. I hope that you have understood it. and kindly watch the video at least twice to understand the chapter fully. Please like, subscribe and share. Thank you so much, dear students, for watching the video. Please take care.